180 years ago, in the middle of the 19th century, Herschel Burn wasn't the quiet, peaceful place it is now. It was a noisy hive of industry. 3 blast furnaces, many coking ovens, roasting kilns were all producing iron, some of which went into the building of the high-level bridge in Newcastle. But why were they producing iron here? And why did it last for such a short length of time?
Unless you look more closely, you could be forgiven for thinking that this is, and always has been, a natural environment. Rich, deciduous woodland, multiple beautiful waterfalls cascading over tumbling rocks, deer and dipper in the stream. But look more closely, especially at the southern end of the Dean, closer to Bellingham, and there are clues. An old broken dam, heaps disguised by rough grassland, small scrubby trees, rows of workers' cottages. Between 1839 and 1849, this Dean, as it enters Bellingham, was the centre of Northumberland's iron-making industry. An easy walk, 5 kilometres there and back, up the signposted trail from Bellingham to the final waterfall, Hareshaw Linn. That tells us the story. Though if you want to get up close to some of the evidence yourself, then you'll have to experience the life of a field geologist and be prepared to crawl through undergrowth and get your feet wet and mucky. The walk starts at the National Park car park. On an area of flat land beside us are 20th century units, overlooked by a terrace of old sandstone cottages. In the middle of the 19th century, this land was the site of a thriving ironworks. Many coking ovens turned locally mined coal into coke. Roasting kilns prepared the iron nodules quarried and mined in the Dean to be fed into 3 blast furnaces. Overlooking it all was the foundry farm, once the work offices, now a terrace of cottages. This was an industry based on local natural resources. Very soon after starting, the path takes us through an area of rough grassland, with many hawthorn bushes and small trees. You can just about make out that the ground beneath the vegetation is full of humps and hollows, evidence of the working of sandstone, ironstone and coal. There were entrances to mines for coal and iron here, and elsewhere in the Dean, but most are long since hidden by vegetation. Peer over the fence, and in the stream is the remains of a dam, which used to store the water to power the wheel that powered the bellows to blast air into the furnaces. About 400 metres further along is an outcrop of the layer of rock which contains the nodules of iron they mined. It's off the path and in the west bank of the stream. So if you want to see it, this is where you have to risk getting wet, dirty feet and your arms scratched. In the little cliff is a dark grey shale, and within the shale are nodules rich in iron. The nodules are made of siderite, iron carbonate, with variable amounts of clay. They often contain fossil shells. Over 335 million years ago, they were iron-rich gels on the floor of a shallow lagoon and were probably rolled by tides and currents into their nodular shape. Ironstone and coal weren't the only rocks exploited here. Local limestone and sandstone were quarried for making the iron and constructing the buildings. Back to the path and across 6 bridges and past many waterfalls. The rocks that Hareshaw Burn cuts through are carboniferous, a repeating series of harder sandstones and limestones and softer shales and siltstones, stacked one on top of the other. They erode at different rates, and that's why they form waterfalls. Sometimes, however, you will see that the rocks are not stacked horizontally, but slope at different angles. Geologists use the structure of rocks, their position and their angle, to work out what happened to them over time. Close to Bridge 2, look over the other side of the burn, and you will see some rocks sloping, dipping geologists say, south, and just downstream another set dipping north. Between them is a big fault, a break in the Earth's crust, just like those that happen during earthquakes. This one dropped the rocks to the south 300 metres vertically down. A few more bridges and we've reached Hareshaw Linn and the turnaround point. It's rocks which form this beautiful waterfall, They show the different cycles of sandstones, shales and limestones, so typical of this part of Northumberland. But while the rocks and the gorge provide the canvas, it's the combination of ancient woodland, the dampness of the air, and the many mosses and trailing plants that will make the most profound impression here. A far cry from the vestiges of past industry, only a short distance away. Nature has reclaimed this Dean. But why did iron making last only 10 years? Well, Bellingham was a long way from the markets, and the rail line arrived too late. There were other human factors. But the reality is that despite the richness of the local minerals, they ultimately proved to be too small and inferior in quality to those elsewhere.
So this has been a tale of 5 natural resources: water, coal, ironstone, sandstone and limestone. Resources we're going to have to learn to use with a lot more respect and care than we have done in the past.